Ladies and gentlemen,
Welcome back to the studio. Tonight, we'll dive into the history of the Mexican Revolution. The best part, we'll have interviews with guests who actually played major roles in this historic event. All coming up soon on Blast from the Past. Alright, time to meet our first guest. He's instigator of the revolution and the one who first rallied the country together. Meet Miguel Hidalgo.
hola. Thank you for having me on your show. Nice to know people still care about this part of our history.
Of course. Now, let's dive right in. Why did you decide to play a role in Mexican independence, and how did you do it?
Well, the truth is, I couldn't just sit back and watch my homeland crumble away. But between you and me, I had the Spanish Inquisition on my tail for reading banned books and not practicing abstinence, so I really had nothing to lose. Still, Peninsulars had long since been suppressing people and who weren't fully white, and that caused much of our country's wealth to be funneled away into their hands. Everything from education to investment to basic human rights were hard to come by for non-whites these days. Even the church had tons of power over us.
So, when do you think the independence movement really picked up speed?
I believe things really began to fall into place once Napoleon came to power. After the French took over Spain and our monarchs abdicated, the people saw an opportunity to gain some autonomy in the government. A major guerrilla war began against the French, and in its wake, people set up a new form of government, the juntas. This new form of governing allowed us to begin participating and inspired others to do the same. Unfortunately, Europeans didn't agree with this and tried to suppress it.
And that's when you decided to take a stand. Can you tell us what happened next?
Of course. 1810, a conspiracy to overthrow the government was discovered. We knew time was running out, so I cried, "Long live the Virgin of Guadalupe and death to the Spaniards." Soon the words were a rallying cry for the movement.
Incredible! So, did your movement gain any traction?
It did. Many of the people in it were poor and desperate, mostly due to a recent famine. They joined our cause for political change, but also for survival. Soon, an army began to form. I led it, and we marched on Guanajuato. In the chaos, many elites were killed. As a result, it deepened the divide between the elites and the lower classes in Mexico, and showed that people had power too.
But your story doesn't have a happy ending. At least, not for you.
That is true. The government came down hard. I was captured, forced to repent my beliefs, and executed. However, it was not in vain. Others like José María Morelos and Ignacio López Rayón continued the struggle and built on what we started. My hope was always that even if I didn't live to see independence, the idea of freedom would live on. And it did.
And because of that, Mexico's fight for independence began. Thank you, Miguel, for joining us and sharing your accounts.
You're welcome, amigo.
And thank you all for listening. That's it for Miguel, but don't leave just yet. We'll be back with another special guest right after this break. Welcome back. If you were here earlier, you heard from Miguel Hidalgo, the man who started the fight for independence. Now we are meeting the man who took over the movement and led it into a new era. Please welcome José María Morelos.
Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you. Now, Hidalgo started the revolution, but you're known for shaping it into a true movement. What made you step up, and what did you do to push things forward?
After Hidalgo was executed, I knew the fight couldn't end there. He'd inspired so many people, me included, and I wanted to ensure that he hadn't died in vain.
So, you focused on building structure into the movement, right?
Exactly. My main goals for the movement were to end slavery, casteism, and the horrid tributes to Spain. However, a major hurdle was gaining support from a people who had been long divided by different economic, political, and social pressures. To combat this, I coined the term Americanos to describe all those who are native to America, showing that regardless of our differences, we are still on the same homeland.
So, did your tactics work? Were you able to achieve your goals?
Initially, I only unified certain sections of the nation, but it was enough to gain traction. Rayon and I worked hard to grow our support, especially in large cities. This would allow us to be supported by not just the rural areas, but the ones bustling and the influential metropolitan sections of the country.
I heard you did a lot to establish a new government in the country. Can you elaborate?
Of course. I played a major role in the establishment of the Supreme Junta in August of 1811. Many other leaders of the movement presided over it, including Ignacio López Rayón and myself. One of our first projects was the creation of the Supreme Congress. It allowed representation of the entire nation and included the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government, all of which would be elected to their positions. Soon, we reached other milestones. We officially declared our independence on November 6, 1813, and wrote our Constitution in October of the next year.
Incredible. Now, wasn't fighting still raging at this time?
Yes, the fighting was brutal, and I was much less successful at it. Rayon and I suffered many brutal defeats at the hands of Spaniards. Consequently, the people weren't happy with my performance and stripped me of my executive powers. But soon, things got worse. I was captured in 1815 and was executed, just like Hidalgo before me. However, I do not think it was in vain. The people continued to fight on and eventually reached independence.
They sure did. Your lasting influence was monumental in pushing the country towards its inevitable independence.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming onto the show.
Of course, amigo.
And there you have it, folks. Jose Maria Morelos. But don't leave just yet. We have one last special guest who you don't want to miss. So see you after the break. Welcome back, folks, to the conclusion of our dive into Mexican independence. Now for our last, but certainly not least, Colonel Agustin de Iturbide.
Hola, amigo. I'm honored to be here.
The honor is all mine. Now, I take it you were the one who revived and led the next chapter of Mexican independence.
See, I began the movement anew, much like Jose Maria Morelos and Ignacio Lopez Rayon before me.
So, how did you end up having to head and rebuild the movement after Morelos and Rayon had already done so much?
After Morelos was executed, much of the movement which had been built fell apart. Manuel Mer y Terra tore down the Supreme Congress, and organized fighting ceased. Only small guerrilla clashes remained.
So, was this the end?
For Hidalgo's movement, yes, but for our independence, never. When their chapter ended, mine began, and would continue writing itself until it ended with our independence.
What was this new chapter?
In March of 1820, Freemasons and cities were able to restore our Constitution, and thanks to the new Superior Chief, Juan O. Doini, and I, a new movement towards total liberation arose from the ashes of the past work. This movement was far more professional, disciplined, and organized than before, and it followed the plan of Iguala. It kept the same government as before, but removed Spain from the equation, and a temporary junta was introduced until a new constitution was finalized. This plan was rapidly accepted, and it finally led to Mexican independence from Spain.
So, was that it? Mexico was finally free.
Not quite. While we were free from imperialism, the deep wounds and divisions inflicted by it were still entrenched in the country and its people. In many ways, it would have been an even longer and bumpier road to fix them.
So, what was Mexico like after its independence, and what problems came to light?
With Spanish rule put to rest, the country was independent, but it still retained many of its problems from the imperialist era. The people were still suppressed, and the church and elites still dominated the land. The stage was set for the next revolution to arrive.
Incredible. Thank you, Colonel, for your insight.
My pleasure.
Well, that's it for our guest speakers, but we aren't quite done yet. Stay tuned for a special extra to help you set the stage for the future of the newly independent Mexico. To the final segment of our show. Thank you for sticking around to the end. But now, let's talk about the ending of the war. The Mexican Revolution had long-lasting consequences. Mexico began to lose control over the territories of California and Texas, as they were unable to defend it successfully. When slavery was banned in 1829, Mexico was unable to keep Texas from slipping away. Though this war was started by the people, no true reforms happened. The original elite still dominated Mexican society, and the casteism was still prevalent. The Catholic Church still held a vice over all of Mexico. These struggles facilitated the Mexican Revolution in the 1910s and the Cristero War of the 1920s. Due to the decimation of Mexican infrastructure, they had to rely on foreign capital from the United States and Britain, giving those countries an unhealthy grip over their newly formed Mexico. They were replacing one tyrant with another. And with that somber note, thank you for tuning in today. Come back next week when we talk about the Chilean Revolution.